There's a moment in sports when the crowd tells you everything you need to know. No commentary needed, no analysts breaking it down, just thousands of people in unison making their feelings crystal clear. That moment happened inside a packed arena in New York City, and the person on the receiving end wasn't a player who just committed a dirty foul. It wasn't a rival coach talking trash. It was the commissioner of the WNBA herself, Cathy Engelbert, walking into a building full of her own league's fans and getting absolutely drowned in boos. And the thing is, she earned every single one of them. Because this wasn't random crowd noise. This was a verdict. Fans who love this league, who show up, who buy tickets, who fill those seats, they looked at the woman running the show and decided loudly and collectively that they've had enough. And if you want to understand why that happened, you have to go back to everything that led up to that moment. The incidents, the silences, the missed opportunities, and the one player sitting in the middle of all of it who has done more for women's basketball than arguably anyone in the last 2 decades. This is the story of how a league got the biggest gift it's ever been handed, and the woman in charge nearly fumbled it completely. The timing of Engelbert's appearance couldn't have been more loaded. She showed up at the New York Liberty game fresh off one of the most talked about altercations the WNBA had seen in years. The Caitlin Clark situation involving Alyssa Thomas. The internet had been on fire. Fans were furious. Players were speaking out. And the commissioner? She'd been quiet. So when she walked into that arena, the New York crowd made sure she knew exactly where things stood. They booed her from the moment she appeared, not politely, not half-heartedly, loudly, clearly, and with the kind of sustained energy that tells you this isn't just frustration, this is something that's been building. And what makes it even more striking is who was doing the booing. These weren't opponents, these weren't trolls from the internet, these were Liberty fans, WNBA fans, people who genuinely love this league and want to see it succeed. When those people start booing your commissioner, that's not a fringe reaction, that's a signal. That's the building telling you something has gone wrong at the top. Engelbert eventually stepped in front of the microphone and addressed what had been happening. She talked about toxicity. She talked about racism and homophobia spreading online. She called it unacceptable, said it wasn't coming from real WNBA fans, and framed it as outside forces using the league to push divisive agendas. And you know what? Some of that is fair. There genuinely are bad actors online who don't care about the sport and just want to pour gasoline on any fire they can find. That part of her statement wasn't wrong. But here's the problem. She stood there, microphone in hand, with the entire world watching, and she said absolutely nothing about Caitlin Clark, nothing about the incidents directed at her specifically, nothing about the players and coaches who had spoken out, no acknowledgement that the league's biggest star had been targeted in ways that went beyond normal basketball physicality. She talked around it, above it, beside it, and never once landed on it. That silence wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. To understand why the frustration exploded the way it did, you have to look at what the league actually did, or more accurately, what it didn't do after Alyssa Thomas went after Caitlin Clark. The play itself was seen by millions of people. Coaches called it out. Fans called it out. The word egregious started circulating because that's genuinely what it looked like. Indiana Fever head coach Steph White didn't mince words. She called it exactly what it was, dangerous and utterly disrespectful, and pointed out that the league had been put on notice about this kind of physicality just days earlier. So what did the WNBA do? 1 game. Alyssa Thomas got a 1-game suspension and was back on the court like nothing happened. No formal statement from the commissioner's office defending Clark, no acknowledgement that the league's biggest star had been targeted in ways that went beyond normal basketball physicality. She talked around it, above it, beside it, and never once landed on it. That silence wasn't an accident. It was a pattern.
Then Alyssa Thomas went public. She broke her silence, and rather than reflecting on what happened, she turned the spotlight onto Engelbert, saying she was only given 10 minutes notice before being told about the situation and the media rounds that would follow. 10 minutes for something that had become a national conversation. And Thomas was frustrated, which fine, okay, she can have feelings about how it was handled. But let's be honest about what that moment revealed. It showed that the league's communication and decision-making in a crisis were completely chaotic. No one at the top seemed to have a clear plan. No one seemed to be steering the ship with any sense of urgency or direction. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark never received a public apology, not from Thomas, not from the league, not from Engelbert. The commissioner, who was quick to speak about online toxicity, couldn't find the words to say, on record, that what happened to Clark was wrong and that it won't be tolerated. That asymmetry, the selective outrage, the strategic silence, is what the New York crowd was responding to when they booed. They weren't booing women's basketball, they were booing the leadership, or the lack of it. Sometimes a fan captures something better than any analyst can. In the middle of all the noise, a letter started circulating, written by an Australian woman who had flown across the world more than once, spending tens of thousands of dollars just to watch Caitlin Clark play in person. And the way she opened that letter stopped people cold. She said she grew up watching Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and the greats of that era. When they retired, basketball lost its pull on her. Years went by, she didn't watch a single game, and then, completely out of nowhere, a clip of a college guard pulling up from 30 feet, no hesitation, pure confidence found its way onto her screen. The passing, the range, the will to win written across her face. She was in awe. That player was Caitlin Clark, and she brought this woman back to a sport she thought she had walked away from forever. When Clark got drafted, she became a Fever fan overnight. She flew from Australia to watch her play live, more than once, tens of thousands of dollars, and she said something in that letter that should be framed and put on the wall of every WNBA front office. A rising tide lifts all boats. Her success was never a threat to the WNBA, it was a gift. That line cuts right to the heart of everything wrong with how this has been handled. Clark's rise didn't take anything away from the players already in the league. It didn't shrink the pie. It made the pie bigger. It brought people back to the sport who hadn't cared in years. It created new fans who then started paying attention to other teams, other players, the whole league. The woman writing that letter isn't just a Clark fan. She's now a WNBA fan. That's how this was supposed to work. That's the opportunity that was sitting right there, handed to the league on a silver platter. And yet, somehow, that gift got treated like a problem. Let's just be direct about the numbers for a second, because the revisionist history around this topic has gotten completely out of hand. Before Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, what was the honest picture? Arenas that were half empty on a good night, ticket prices so low that people joked they were cheaper than a fast food combo meal, television deals that barely moved the needle, a league that had genuine die-hard fans but was fighting constantly to be taken seriously in the broader sports conversation. Then Indiana Fever selected Caitlin Clark with the first overall pick, and everything changed almost overnight. Rival teams started selling out their stadiums not when they hosted their biggest rivals, but when Indiana came to town. Think about that. Teams were using Caitlin Clark as the draw on their own home floors. Ticket prices jumped, TV ratings jumped. Games that would have aired on a secondary cable channel were suddenly on primetime networks. Journalists who had never written a single story about the WNBA were covering Fever road trips like they were playoff runs. And here's the part that gets overlooked in these conversations. The other players in the league benefited from this too. More eyes on the league means more sponsorship dollars. More sponsorship dollars means better contracts, better facilities, better media coverage for everyone. The woman defending Clark isn't taking food off anyone else's plate. She's the reason the restaurant is suddenly packed.
So, when you hear suggestions, even subtle ones, that Engelbert has been lukewarm on fully embracing Clark as the face of the league, that she's been slow to defend her, slow to market her, slow to acknowledge what she means, that isn't just a PR failure, it's a strategic failure of the highest order. You don't get opportunities like this twice. There's been a version of this narrative floating around, and it reportedly traces back to attitudes within the league's leadership that Caitlin Clark should feel fortunate, that the WNBA gave her a platform, that without the league she wouldn't be making the money she's making. And this might be the single most disconnected take in the entire situation. Caitlin Clark was a millionaire before she ever set foot in a WNBA practice facility. In college, her name, image, and likeness deals were generating serious money. Gatorade, State Farm, multiple major brand partnerships. She had built a commercial identity so powerful that she could have walked away from professional basketball the moment her college career ended and still had a career worth tens of millions of dollars. She could have just shown up at basketball events, signed autographs, filmed commercials, and cashed checks for the next decade without ever taking a charge or running a pick and roll again. She chose to play. She chose the WNBA, not because she had no options, but because she loves the game and wanted to compete at the highest level. That decision, her choosing this league, is the reason Indiana Fever games became events. It's the reason the franchise had a national television presence. It's the reason rival teams started leaning into scheduling narratives around when Clark was coming to their city. For anyone in league leadership to frame it the other way around, as though Engelbert's league did Clark a favor, is not just factually backward, it's the kind of thinking that explains every other decision that's frustrated fans over the past year. If you genuinely believe your struggling league was doing a favor for a once-in-a-generation talent who was already a global brand, then everything else, the silence, the weak punishments, the missed marketing opportunities, starts to make a strange kind of sense. It's the logic of someone who doesn't realize what they're holding. People have started asking the question out loud that a lot of fans have been thinking quietly. What happens if Caitlin Clark leaves, not retires, not takes a break, but genuinely decides that the treatment she's receiving, the physical targeting, the league's silence, the complete absence of someone at the top publicly having her back, isn't worth it? What if she takes her brand, her fan base, and her talent overseas? The answer isn't complicated, and it isn't pretty for the WNBA. Leagues overseas would take her immediately. Any major European or Asian women's basketball league would restructure their entire marketing calendar around her arrival. They'd fill arenas, they'd generate international press, they'd sell merchandise to people in countries where women's basketball currently has almost zero cultural footprint. For the right organization, signing Caitlin Clark wouldn't just be a player acquisition, it would be a business transformation. And back in the States, the fans who came back to basketball because of that clip of a girl launching threes from 30 feet, they don't follow the WNBA, they follow Caitlin Clark. When she plays, they watch. When she's not playing, that specific appointment television feeling goes away. The casual viewers, the lapsed fans, the people who flew in from Australia, they don't suddenly become dedicated fans of every other team in the league. They just stop watching. And then the arenas go back to being half full, and the ticket prices go back to being what they were, and the TV deals go back to being what they were. The WNBA existed before Caitlin Clark. It'll exist after her. But the question isn't whether it survives, it's whether it ever gets back to that moment of genuine cultural momentum that she created. Because moments like that don't come along on a schedule. You don't get to plan for them. They arrive and you either seize them completely or you let them slip through. And then you spend the next decade explaining to people why the league never quite broke through the way it seemed like it might.
Let's come back to that arena in New York. Because that image, Cathy Engelbert walking into a building full of WNBA fans and getting booed, is actually a remarkable thing when you sit with it. Commissioners don't usually get booed. They're background figures. They show up at events, hand out trophies, say the right things, and mostly stay out of the product itself. The fact that fans felt strongly enough to make their voices heard that loudly in that setting tells you that the frustration has crossed out of the online conversation and into the real world. Engelbert, to her credit, showed up. She didn't hide. She stood there and took the boos and eventually addressed the media. And some of what she said was right. Online hatred is real. It doesn't represent the actual fan base, and the league does need to protect its players. All true. But you can say true things and still be missing the point. You can talk about toxicity and hate and protecting players without ever acknowledging that one specific player has been subjected to a pattern of physical aggression that the league has consistently under-addressed.
You can speak passionately about inclusion and respect while staying carefully silent about the one situation that everyone watching already knows about. That selective use of the microphone is what the boos were about. Not the league itself, not women's basketball, not even Engelbert personally, necessarily. The boos were about a style of leadership that seems more comfortable addressing abstract problems than specific ones. That's more at home talking about what's wrong with the internet than what's wrong with how a one-game suspension sends a message to every player on every court that you can get away with almost anything as long as it's not caught on the most viral clip of the week. The New York crowd, to be fair, knew exactly what they were doing. These fans love their sport. They want it to be better. And sometimes the loudest statement of love is the one that says, "This isn't good enough, and we expect more." The WNBA is at a moment it won't get back. The cultural window that opened when Caitlin Clark entered the league is still open, but windows don't stay open indefinitely. Right now, the league has a chance to build on the momentum she created, to convert casual viewers into genuine fans, to use the attention to shine a light on all the other incredible players who've been putting in work for years without anywhere near the recognition they deserve, to establish itself as a must-watch product, not just during Clark highlights, but across the full season. That requires leadership that's willing to make hard calls clearly and quickly. It requires a commissioner who doesn't just speak in careful, measured statements designed to offend nobody, but who actually steps in front of the moment and drives it forward. It requires taking the league's biggest star seriously, not as someone to be managed, but as a collaborator in building something that benefits everyone involved. None of that is happening right now. Instead, what fans are seeing is an institution that reacts slowly, punishes lightly, stays quiet when it should be loudest, and speaks up mostly when it can address something comfortably abstract. And the fans, in New York, in Australia, in living rooms and sports bars across the world, they see it, they feel it, and eventually they respond. Sometimes with tweets, sometimes with think pieces, and sometimes when the commissioner walks through the door of an arena she's supposed to be running with the kind of sustained, unified, unmistakable noise that you can't explain away or speak carefully around. A crowd doesn't boo a ghost, they boo a presence. They boo someone whose decisions they can feel. And in that arena in New York, thousands of people who love this sport looked at the person making those decisions and made their feelings clear in the most direct way a live audience can. The question now is whether anyone in a position to actually change things is paying attention, because the clock on this moment isn't stopping. The window is open, the opportunity is real. And somewhere in Indiana, a player who never needed this league to have a future is still showing up, still competing, still drawing crowds that this sport hadn't seen in a generation. She deserves better than silence. The sport deserves better than silence. And if the people running it can't figure that out, the fans already have. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the WNBA is doing enough to protect its players and build around its biggest stars? And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed because this conversation is just getting started.